Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, derbyologist, and joining me again as co-host Capping with Candace. Candace here. Candace, this week we are going to kind of take an eclectic look at the races. A couple of 3-year-old stakes races and then a 2-year-old maiden special weight race at Canterbury Park. But Canterbury's running under the lights on Saturday, so kind of some late afternoon, evening action. We're going to start it off with the West Virginia Derby. Big purse for this race, $750,000, and I think from a betting standpoint, bettors are going to get what they want as it's a pretty competitive field.
It really is, and I think it's kind of a true race pace-wise too. We'll have horses like Super Colossal, um, maybe Iron Fist, or All I See Is Gold going forward. Then you kind of have your mid-pack runners, and maybe probably War Story will be the one at the back, which is typical of him. But, nothing too crazy. I do think with those horses going forward, there is some speed in here. Particularly with Iron Fist kind of pressing that pace. I think, even though his last race, he kind of dawdled along with slow fractions and showed some versatility, he does have speed. So I think he could really press Super Colossal in this sort of a spot and force a little bit of a speedy pace here. Iron Fist, I know a lot of people have said that they like him in this spot. I did, quite like his last one. I was impressed by it. I think he is a horse who finally is putting things together, making good kind of on his potential from everyone saw from him from the get-go. But this is much deeper waters than he's been dealing with lately. And I do, really wonder if he can stretch out for this distance. Perhaps he's a little bit better at a mile. I think 9 furlongs kind of tests him a little bit. So I would be a little bit opposed to him over this length of trip. A couple of these are cross-entered in a few races. I know Tommy Macho probably not running here. Stanford, I think maybe remains to be determined whether or not he's running here. But again, should either of those horses run in this spot, that's more speed here. That would be, in play. I think the logical play in here is Made from Lucky, just class-wise has a bit of a class edge on these. Won the Peter Pan, I thought, in pretty convincing fashion, and that form was franked after that with Conquest Curlinate, and, ran okay in the Belmont. I don't think we expected a lot from him there, and he just kind of sat around and did his thing, but comes here to a softer spot, gets that class relief. He's just kind of a one-paced plotter type, but should there be this much speed in the field, that really could ultimately help him out here. For me, though, I ended up landing on Bent on Bourbon. He's won a couple races in a row now. I thought his Iowa Derby, he really won that in convincing fashion, and kind of just pick him because I think he gets the trip. I think he's going to sit off behind the main speeds, and he's going to get that box seat run, and, I think he's going to get the trip to show if he's good enough to do it, and, he ran well enough over a mile and 16, so I'm not too worried about the distance, and he's not a big name, so even though he has some wins, I expect others to take more money than him, and for him to be a good enough price, he's 5-1 on the morning line. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he drifted a little bit from that, so I'm going to go Bent on Bourbon for the win, but I am very afraid of Made from Lucky. I get the sense that he is very well meant in this spot.
If the expected speed does go, which I think Stanford more than likely will run in this spot, Super Colossal's got some speed, especially from the outside. I think he's going to be forwardly placed just because he's going to have to be, because that's a little bit narrower track. And then, like you mentioned, Iron Fist the last couple of races has shown more tactical speed and can be up on the pace or just off the pace. So I think we're going to get some honest fractions. Iron Fist, for me, I mean, I've been a big fan since race 1 with him. His price tag drew some people to him. And because of that price tag, he's just always going to be overbet.
Yeah.
And then you add in Mike Smith, but I think you said it logically. If you really black out his price tag, which as a handicapper, now that he's ran 5 times, that price tag means nothing. It really doesn't. So if you black that out, all of a sudden, I think his odds would go up 1 or 2 points, and I just think, I'll let him beat me on the stretch out, shipping across the country, going definitely up in class. Last race was a 5-horse field. like, who did he really beat in that race? Now he's got to stretch out. He's got to ship across country. And these aren't grade one horses, but they're grade three horses, and that's still a
Mm-hmm.
step up. So I just think he's going to be underlaid, so I don't want him. Um, I like Brent Bent on Bourbon. I'm assuming War Story is going to run in the Haskell.
Yeah.
That's what they've been saying for a month, although I think he'd fit actually good in this spot.
You better.
I think he may be making the wrong call there, but I'm going to go with Talaverve just because I think there's a little bit of speed, and I think that people are kind of going. His Preakness race wasn't that good. It was more slop-aided, but he did have a nice maiden win, and I guess I like him more from a stamina standpoint than Iron Fist, and I think he'll be 5 or 6 times the odds. So I'll just take a shot with Talaverve in the hopes that maybe Super Colossal and Stanford kind of get a little bit of a tussle again. And I'm not sold on Made from Lucky. So I think Talaverve is really just going to be my win play show. And I think his odds are going to float really high just because handicappers just really don't know what to do with Dallas Stewart in these spots. And I think they overreact both ways. Like in races that he shouldn't have a chance, like a Belmont or something, people will play him. And then in a race like this where people kind of go, well, he ain't going to do it, he might actually have more of a shot. So Talaverve closing from behind with a little bit of a speed duel.
Yeah, I do think this is a race, so, if you're playing multiple race wagers, I'll play the pick four here. That's what I did last year, too. I think you kind of have to cover your bases a little. So for me, well, I'm playing Bent on Bourbon because I think he gets a good trip to win. I mean, like a horse like Stanford, I feel like in a pick four or something is a must use because if they don't go very fast out front, if maybe Super Colossal goes forward and then they kind of try to slow everybody down, I think he's very dangerous from that rail post. And if anybody gets this distance, Malibu Moon out of his distorted humor mare is probably the one to do it.
Should be a good close finish. Last year we saw an exciting finish. So this race, again, usually when you get the 8.5 furlong races, it kind of evens it out. Now this is 9 furlongs, but I think they're pretty evenly matched. So I do think the shorter stretch kind of favors maybe a horse like Iron Fist getting that little bit more, Stanford too. But I also think I could just see it collapsing a little bit if none of them really want a part of 9 furlongs. So at least Talaverve wants 9 furlongs. It's just a matter of how he works out his trip in this race. The Jim Dandy is the most talented field of the 4 3-year-old stakes races this year from top to bottom. And this one, you could go 4 or 5 different ways depending on how you want to take the current form of these horses.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of questions here as far as where are all these horses. I mean, we had Fermento, who's a horse who kind of is just always around. He's in all these big races. I don't know if we always remember him running in them. I don't remember him running in all of them. But he was there, and he has the experience, and if he's a horse, if he gets the setup, he can do something. He just doesn't often get that setup, and I don't really anticipate him getting it here, which is unfortunate with the short field. Japan, probably the one we know the most about because he was a little bit of a later developer and has run more recently. Can't fault anything he's been doing, and can't fault how Bill Mott's horses have been going, and certainly he's been training very well up to this point, at least as far as speed goes, training very quickly. But there's questions about others here. Upstart hasn't ran since the Derby, was such a high prospect going into there. Something obviously went wrong. He finished last. But now you look at the work tab, very solid, regular work tab and fast. Finished his most recent work was July 25th, and he ran 4 furlongs and 47 and a fifth, first out of 109 runners. So, I mean, he seems primed, ready to go. Rick Violet would want to get a big win here at Saratoga in New York. And I think it says something, too, that they put him in this spot straight off the bench. And they've said for a while that he was going to run here, too. Frosted, probably the one who's going to take the most money. And probably one I'd be against. I've never been a huge Frosted fan. He's tough for me. I think he's incredibly one-paced. He needs kind of a little bit of a meltdown in front of him to get wins. I just don't see it, and I wonder how much he has left in the tank after running big win the Wood Memorial, big in the Derby, big in the Belmont. He hasn't had quite the freshening that some of the others have had, and I wonder if that's ultimately going to hurt him in this sort of a spot. And then last we have Texas Red, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner, finished second to Speedster last time. I think that was his true form. That was over a mile, and I know people are saying, well, that's short of his best, and it might be, but he won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile in impressive fashion over a mile and 16. So it's not like a mile isn't within his realm of distances he can win races over. I just thought Spicer was better than him, and that it wasn't even close. So while Texas Red, I fully anticipate him running well and getting a piece of this, I would be very much against him for the win. And I do think he is another one who's pretty pace dependent, needs the type of a setup in this sort of spot. And I just don't see a lot of speed here. I'm going to go with Japan. Nothing too fancy. He's the horse in form. He's with the trainer in form. And I kind of just hope they go forward with him and just say hasta la vista, because there's not that much speed in here. I think you can make a strong case that he is the best horse in this field, at least right now. So I'm going to go Japan, but I'm very intrigued to see how Upstart runs, because if he is back into form, I think that's a major player going forward for the rest of the season in this division.
Yeah, I think the top four contenders are Texas Red, Upstart, Japan, and Frosted, and really how you evaluate. I'm going the exact opposite on Japan. I know he's going to take all the money, especially with Bill Mott's hot start at the meet. Totally unimpressed with the three-horse field win the last time. I think that totally overinflates his value. Totally has a turf stride, bred for the turf. I've been waiting anxiously for this horse to be entered in this race because I have a feeling he's going to take a lot of money, and so I'm tossing him as the worst of the four. As my top pick, I'm going with Upstart. I just throw out the Derby. Every other race, he's got a 107, a 105, a 103, and a 101. He beat Frosted a couple of times. Worked out a mile in 140, and then had the bullet out of 109 horses last week. Clockers are raving about that workout again. That's what he was doing last February off the layoff and before the Holy Bull. So I think he's going to be tough in this race. So I'm going with Upstart. Texas Red, I think, just ran into a buzzsaw the last time in Speedster. So he could maybe be a little, I mean, I think that's kind of who he is and what he does, but in this field, I think he fits. So he might win. I guess that would be my second pick. Frosted to me is a good horse, and he's a legitimate grade one horse. He's just got 5 lifetime seconds, and I always think it's not that he's one paced, he's never going to get that first jump, and in a short field, he's just always going to not get that first jump. But he could win the race. I probably won't use him as that much. I'm really just going Upstart and Texas Red and tossing Japan, but Frosted could win. So I guess I rank him as Upstart 1, Texas Red 2, Frosted most likely to probably hit the board of the 4. And then Japan, I just think, with a turf horse and going to be way overbet and not impressed with the 3-horse field the last time.
Yeah, for me, I'll use Japan and Upstart and multiple race wagers. Not going to go too deep here. I don't think you can really afford to go too deep here, to be honest. I guess for me, Frost is probably the one that I'm most against. I'm just not a big fan, and I think short fields in particular really hinder him. But yeah, Upstart's really the intriguing one, and they always say the Saratoga main track tends to be very testing. I wonder if it'll help him that he had experience too over that incredibly testing Gulfstream surface. We know he can handle that type of a surface at least.
Well, the definitely serves as a prep for the Travers, and depending on what happens on Sunday in the Haskell and whether American Pharoah wins and comes to the Travers. But I think what we'll see is probably, I wouldn't be surprised if all 4 or 5 of these horses wheel right back in the Travers if Pharoah doesn't run. So
Yeah.
I think pace and really watching the trip here, Frosted does have a lot better chance of winning the Travers because he is a true mile and a quarter
Yes.
horse. So they're the one that's going to be the least, I think, trying to win this race. The other 3 really have so many questions. They need a win. I mean, to prove that they can legitimately be a Travers winner. So I think the other 3 have a little bit more incentive here, and I think Frosted's the only one with no incentive to really go all out in this race because he may not be the greatest horse, but I mean, he can just go 10 furlongs. He's just going to get the trip and he seems to be healthy and he hasn't missed any workouts. I just don't see him going by the wayside in the next week or so. So Frosted to me seems like the hardiest of the bunch. I just don't know if he's the most likely winner of this Jim Dandy. But on the other hand, it wouldn't surprise me if he won, just because I mean, I've never been a big fan of Texas Red, and Upstart. Yeah, I like him. He's good, but he's not. Yeah, I mean, I mean, Pharaoh just towers above this class. You know, these four are that second tier, and then you really have that third tier with Mr. Z and Divining Rod and Fame and Fortune and all those horses. So these are the second tier horses. I just don't really know, what else you can do.
Yeah, and I think it's just so tough because I think when you talk about Pharaoh, it's not even just that he's so classy. I think his running style makes him so dangerous. How do you beat a horse like that, who has that high cruising speed that you can carry for such a long period of time? It's almost like everyone would need him to regress to even be able to touch him.
So I think this does serve as a good prep for the Travers, and I wouldn't be surprised to see 4 or 5 of these horses wheel right back into the Travers. Hopefully, you get a few more in that race, and maybe a sprinter stretching out to kind of give it a different pace factor. But I really think if competitive edge goes in the Haskell, I see Upstart on the lead in 112 and change, and I just don't see that horse losing off that. But I wouldn't even be surprised if Texas Red is closer to the pace this time. I just think pace is going to really make the race, and Frosted I just don't think can be up. As a 2-year-old, he was closer to the pace, so if Frosted wanted to run up near the pace, he could.
Yeah.
I really don't know how it's going to shape out, but I do think whichever one of those horses or jockeys gets aggressive is probably going to win the race.
Yeah, because there just isn't that much speed in here, and maybe that's what you have to do with a horse like Frosted. If you're not going to get the first jump, maybe he needs to make it happen for himself. I mean, he obviously stays the trip. Maybe the best thing for him would be to go forward and really turn this into a true stamina test.
Which is all I'm a Chatterbox did last week. Everybody got lulled into thinking she was a steep closer, and they went right back to what they did last fall. I mean, a good horse is versatile, and that's exactly what I'm a Chatterbox did. She had the lead, and she just gritted her way around the track. I could definitely see Frosted doing that. So I could see any one of those four doing it. I just think whoever gets aggressive is probably going to win the race, and I definitely think who's ever leading coming into the stretch is going to win the race. I just am not sold on who's going to be on the lead coming into the stretch.
Yeah.
Canterbury Park, maiden race, 2-year-olds, and a nice full field, and this is carded as race 7 on Saturday night in Shakopee.
It is. I mean, we haven't done too many 2-year-old races to this point. I feel like we did a lot more by this point last year, but I thought this one was a nice one with, a big full field and, some trainers shipping in here. Some of the bigger name trainers are shipping in here, and some, decently well-bred horses in here. I'm personally going back to Old Faithful. I don't have many of Tis Wonderful babies left, but they've been very, very good to me on debut. It's astounding how well his 2-year-olds do first time out. The mare wasn't much. The female family really wasn't much, at least close up. But I think his influence is always a very precocious one. Comes in here for a trainer, Francisco Bravo, who does very well first time out. So Tis Little Bull, number 6, is the one who I'm really looking at least at some sort of a price. Obviously, you have to pay attention to the 2 on the outside, Punky B, who comes in for Tom Amos, and Zanita, who comes in for Robertino Diodoro. Oh my gosh. Both of them are making their second start. Both ran okay last time out. I prefer Zanita of the 2 with the blinkers on this time out. So I'm going with number 6, the Tis Wonderful. For a price play, but if you're playing multiple races, I also would use Zanita from the outside.
Yeah, I was surprised. There's a couple of nice horses. Some of the leading owners and trainers that do very well every year at Canterbury. The connections of Clodiva, number 7. That one kind of intrigued me a little bit. And I noticed Windstar has a horse called Go Go Dana out of the 2-hole, which, this is a $25,000 purse. And, every once in a while they kind of spread out some of their stock. This is that Shannon Ritter who won the Sunland Derby a few years back with a Windstar horse. So you never know. They kind of divvy up their stock. and this may be a runner. So I wouldn't be put off by the fact that it's at Canterbury because they divvy up their stock when these horses are back, last fall. So this, since it's a well-bred horse, I ended up going with Zanita out of the outside just because of the Mercedes stable, and Diordino runs well with these horses. I think the tote board will tell a lot out of the 11 hole. If that horse opens up at 7-5, 8-5, his horses usually run lights out. Tom Amos has had an interesting meet at Canterbury. He's doing well, but he has a lot of horses that get bet way down and finish off the board, and then he's had a bunch of 3-5s win. So I guess the money hasn't meant as much with Tom Amos, but with Diodoro, it seems like if out of the 11 hole, I think that horse, if it opens up at 8-5, it could mean that's live. But the Windstar horse, Go Dana Go, kind of intrigues me a little bit.
Yeah, I saw that one, the Windstar horse, Go Dana Go. I was a little bit maybe more concerned about that one over this distance. This is just 5 furlongs, so 5 furlongs for a Malibu Moon out of Danzig's Dream or Rubiano Mare. I don't know, it might be a little bit short, perhaps for my liking, but yeah, some pretty nice bred horses I thought in here. Um, there's the one that you mentioned, that Clodovia comes in here. That's a Sydney's Candy. We haven't seen too many of those yet, so kind of nice to see some of these young sires mixed in here too.
Yeah, Sydney's Candy and Twirling Candy are both freshman sires, and I expect Twirling Candy to have a little bit more successful career. Sydney's Candy was a little bit kind of an odd shape. He was built very much like a quarter horse, but he had a big rear end and he weighed a lot. So, whereas Twirling Candy more Clodiva, I think, just because of the connections and the mare on that one gets the broodmare sire gets some win early ones. I think that one's in play, and then Zanita, and then I'd probably go with the two, the Windstar horse. But the Amos horse will probably bet, and he's already got a second place finish, so we'll see how that one shapes up. So we've got the Haskell on Sunday, the Curlin on Friday, which may bring some horses into the Travers, or at least maybe the winner. And then Saturday, West Virginia and Jim Dandy will kind of sort out which 5 or 6 of those horses go to the Travers Stakes later on this month.
3-year-olds everywhere, all running in the same weekend. But yeah, I mean, certainly for this division, this is kind of the big summer weekend, so we can get a little bit of a sense of, kind of separating the good horses who might be heading towards the Breeders' Cup Classic or Breeders' Cup Mile or Cigar Mile from maybe some of the pretenders. And kind of it's interesting always at this point to see who has progressed off of the Triple Crown campaign, and who's maybe not quite the same.
I think we'll watch the races and see how it all shakes out. Of course, American Pharoah, how easily he wins may determine if he runs in the Travers. So that could play a key role. And then if he runs in the Travers, some of these other horses may start routing to the City of Brotherly Love. So it's going to all be a big jigsaw puzzle that'll be determined by the results of this week's races. That's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire.